My name is Eliza, and I'm 28 years old. On what was supposed to be the happiest day of my sister's life, I stood on the manicured lawn of a lavish wedding venue in a dress I'd paid for myself and watched my own mother physically block me from a family photograph. She wanted a picture of her perfect family, and in that moment, it was brutally clear that I wasn't part of it. They thought I would just shrink away and cry, as I always had. What they didn't know was that the one person they'd hired to capture their perfect day knew their secret, and he wasn't about to let them erase me. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Before I tell you how this one humiliating moment changed everything, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your voice when others try to silence you. Trust me, you'll want to see how this picture-perfect day fell completely out of frame. Before my sister Chloe's wedding, my life was quiet, predictable. I work as a research librarian at a city university, a job that suits my personality perfectly. I love the smell of old books, the hushed reverence of the archives, and the small thrill of helping a student find that one obscure text that makes their entire thesis click into place. I live in a small but tidy one-bedroom apartment that I furnish with carefully chosen second-hand pieces. I budget meticulously, I pay my bills on time, and I have a modest savings account that I'm proud of. By all accounts, I'm a responsible, self-sufficient adult. In my family, however, those qualities made me something else entirely: invisible. To understand what happened on that wedding day, you have to understand the landscape of my childhood. I grew up in a home with two daughters, but it always felt like there was only one star in the sky. My younger sister, Chloe, was the Sunday. She was born with a spark that I never had, effortlessly beautiful, charming, and vivacious. Where I was cautious, she was bold. Where I was studious, she was social. My parents were utterly captivated by her. They weren't bad people, they just operated under a simple, unspoken rule. Chloe's wants were needs, and my needs were negotiable. This wasn't a secret. It was the very air we breathed. I have a memory from when I was 16 that perfectly illustrates this. I had worked for an entire summer scooping ice cream, saving every dollar for a beat-up 1998 Toyota Corolla. It was my ticket to freedom, a way to get to my part-time job and avoid the school bus. I was so proud of that car. 2 weeks after I bought it, Chloe, who had just gotten her learner's permit, took it without asking to go to a party. She ended up crashing it into a mailbox, crumpling the entire front bumper. When my parents found out, my father's first words weren't to me, but to Chloe. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I stood there, watching my hard-earned freedom mangled on the side of the road, and listened as my mother soothed a crying Chloe, telling her, "It's just a car, honey. Accidents happen." The next day, my father co-signed a loan for Chloe to get a brand new bright red Jetta. "She needs something reliable and safe," he explained to me, as if my old Corolla wasn't good enough. When I asked how I would get to work, he handed me $20 for the city bus and said, "You're resourceful, Eliza. You'll figure it out." And I did. I always did. That was my role. The resourceful, responsible, invisible daughter who just figured it out. The pattern continued into our college years. Chloe decided she wanted to be an artist and enrolled in a prestigious, out-of-state private art school with a tuition that made my eyes water. My parents liquidated a portion of their retirement savings to pay for it, beaming with pride as they talked about their creative, free-spirited daughter. She dropped out after 3 semesters, deciding the structure was stifling her muse, and moved back home with a mountain of expensive, unused art supplies. There were no recriminations, only sympathy. A year later, when I was accepted into the library sciences program at our state university, a much more affordable and practical choice, My parents sat me down for a serious talk about finances. "We've stretched ourselves a bit thin for Chloe's education," my mother said, avoiding my gaze. "We can help, but you'll need to take out some loans and keep your part-time job." I remember nodding silently, the familiar feeling of being a secondary consideration washing over me. I worked 30 hours a week while carrying a full course load. I graduated with honors and a significant amount of student debt. Chloe, meanwhile, was living rent-free in their basement, finding herself. My parents' financial support for her never wavered. They paid for her yoga teacher training, a failed Etsy shop selling macrame plant hangers, and a 6-week trip to Bali. My contributions to the family were of a different nature. I was the one who remembered their wedding anniversary and planned a surprise dinner. I was the one who drove my dad to his colonoscopy and sat in the waiting room for 3 hours. I was the one my mother called when she couldn't figure out how to use her new smartphone. I was the family's functional support system, while Chloe was the family's decorative centerpiece. I loved my sister, I truly did. But it was a complicated love, tangled with a lifetime of quiet resentment. I learned to protect my heart by keeping a certain distance, by never expecting too much. I built my own life, found my own joy in my quiet apartment and my fulfilling career. I had friends who saw me for who I was, who valued my steady presence and dry wit. I had convinced myself that it was enough. I didn't need my family's approval to feel whole. But deep down, there was a part of me, a 16-year-old girl still standing on the side of the road, that just wanted them to see me, to truly see me. I thought, naively, that my sister's wedding might be the moment that changed. A family event so significant that there would be no choice but to acknowledge that there were, in fact, 2 daughters. I couldn't have been more wrong. The wedding wouldn't just fail to include me. It would become the stage for my family's most public and painful rejection yet. I just didn't realize that this time, someone else would be watching. The catalyst, as it often is, was a man. But not just any man. Chloe met Liam at a charity gala. My parents had spent a fortune on tickets for, hoping she'd network. Liam was everything they could have dreamed of. He was in his early 30s, a successful investment banker from a family with old money and a name that carried weight in our city. He was handsome, polished, and utterly smitten with Chloe's bubbly, carefree personality. Their courtship was a whirlwind. 6 months after they met, he proposed on a private yacht with a diamond ring so large it looked like a beautiful, glittering handcuff. The engagement announcement was a spectacle. My parents hosted a lavish party at their country club. I watched from a corner as my mother, beaming, held up Chloe's hand to show off the ring to a circle of her friends. "We are just so thrilled," she gushed. "Liam is a wonderful man. He sees how special our Chloe Island. She deserves this. She deserves everything." I smiled and clapped at all the right moments, but a familiar knot was tightening in my stomach. The narrative was already being written. Chloe, the golden child, had finally won her golden prize. For me, the engagement was a complex mix of emotions. I was genuinely happy for my sister. I wanted her to find love and stability. Liam seemed like a kind, steadying presence, and I hoped he would be good for her. But I was also filled with a quiet dread. I knew what a wedding in my family meant. It wouldn't be a simple celebration of love. It would be a production, a performance of wealth and status, with my parents as the executive producers and Chloe as the undisputed star. My role, I suspected, would be somewhere between unpaid intern and background extra. The planning began almost immediately, and it consumed our family's entire existence. My mother and Chloe became a 2-woman tornado of wedding magazines, fabric swatches, and venue tours. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from my mother, not asking for my opinion, but giving me tasks. "Eliza, can you research calligraphers? Find someone good, but not too expensive." "Eliza, Your father and I are taking Chloe and Liam to a cake tasting at the Ritz. Can you swing by the house and let the dog out? I was the logistical coordinator for a party I felt increasingly disconnected from. Liam's family was contributing a significant amount of money to the wedding, which only amplified my parents' desire for everything to be perfect. The word perfect became my mother's mantra. The perfect dress, the perfect flowers, the perfect venue. Perfection, in her eyes, was about image. It was about creating a day that looked flawless from the outside, a day that would be the envy of all their friends. One evening, about 4 months before the wedding, I was at my parents' house for our obligatory Sunday dinner. Chloe was scrolling through a photographer's portfolio on her iPad, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I just don't know, Mom," she sighed dramatically. "This guy is good, but is he exceptional?" My mother peered over her shoulder. "We need the best, sweetie. These photos are forever. They're the memory of the day." I cleared my throat and offered a suggestion. "You know, I have a friend from college, Mark. He's a wedding photographer now. He's incredibly talented, and his work is more artistic, less staged." Chloe glanced up from her iPad, a dismissive look on her face. "A friend of yours? Is he expensive?" "He's built a great reputation," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "I don't know his exact rates, but his portfolio is stunning." My mother waved her hand. "Oh, Eliza, that's sweet. But we need a true professional, not one of your artsy friends. Liam's parents expect the best." The sting of her words was sharp and familiar. My world, my friends, my tastes, they were always seen as less than, not quite up to the family's aspirational standards. I dropped the subject, retreating into the quiet shell I had built for myself over the years. But a few weeks later, my mother called me, her voice flustered. The exceptional photographer they had wanted was already booked. Their second and third choices were also unavailable. "I don't suppose you still have the name of that friend of yours?" she asked, the reluctance in her voice palpable. "I did. I gave her Mark's information, and to my surprise, they hired him." Chloe loved his portfolio, and even my mother had to admit he was very skilled. I felt a small secret thrill knowing that my quiet contribution would be a part of the day. Mark and I had been close in college, part of a small group of bookish, artsy kids. He was one of the few people who understood my family dynamic without my having to explain it. When I called to congratulate him on getting the job, he sounded happy to be involved. "It'll be great to see you, Eli," he said, using my old college nickname. "Just promise me you'll actually get in some of the photos this time." His comment was a gentle ribbing, a reference to my old habit of hiding from cameras, but it felt strangely prophetic. I had no idea how desperately I would need him to remember that promise. The storm was gathering, and the first raindrops were beginning to fall. As the wedding day drew closer, the small slights and casual dismissals began to escalate into a pattern of deliberate exclusion. It was as if, in their pursuit of the perfect day, my family had decided that my presence was an imperfection that needed to be managed, minimized, and, if possible, hidden. The first major incident was the bridesmaid dress shopping. Chloe had 5 bridesmaids, her sorority sisters, and 2 friends from her yoga class. I was, of course, the maid of honor. It was a title given out of obligation, not affection. The shopping trip was planned for a Saturday at a high-end bridal boutique downtown. I had cleared my schedule and was genuinely looking forward to it, hoping for a rare moment of sisterly bonding. On Friday night, I got a text from Chloe. "Hey, change of plans for tomorrow. The girls and I are just going to grab brunch and then pop by the boutique. It'll probably be super boring, just us trying on a million things. No need for you to come. I'll just send you the one we pick and you can order it online." The smiley face at the end felt like a tiny, passive-aggressive dagger. It was a flimsy excuse, and we both knew it. she didn't want me there. I spent that Saturday alone in my apartment, scrolling through social media and watching their day unfold through a series of happy, filtered Instagram stories. There they were, clinking champagne glasses at brunch, posing with dozens of beautiful gowns. They looked like a tribe, a perfect, gleaming unit. I looked at my own reflection in the dark screen of my phone and felt a profound sense of otherness. The dress they chose was a whisper-thin, blush-colored silk gown that cost $400. When I texted Chloe to ask if there might be a less expensive option, her reply was instant. "Mom and I think it's perfect. It's what everyone is wearing. Don't worry, it'll be worth it." For whom? I wondered. The bridal shower was the next battleground. As maid of honor, I was expected to host it. I spent weeks planning an event that I thought Chloe would love. I booked a private room at a charming local tear room, arranged for a string duo to play, and handmade delicate, personalized party favors. It was elegant, thoughtful, and a significant strain on my budget. 2 weeks before the event, my mother called. "Eliza, honey, I was just talking with Chloe," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "She was saying that a tea party feels a little quaint, a bit old-fashioned. Her friends are more of a cocktail crowd." Before I could respond, she continued, "So, I've had a wonderful idea. I've spoken to the event coordinator at the country club. We can host a cocktails and couture-themed shower there. It will be so much more chic. I've already put down the deposit. You can just cancel your little tear room thing." There was no discussion. My efforts, my plans, my money already spent on non-refundable deposits, it was all dismissed in a single breath. I was demoted from host to guest at my own party. The shower was exactly what they wanted. Loud, flashy, and performative. I watched as Chloe opened a mountain of extravagant gifts. My own carefully chosen present, a first edition of her favorite childhood book, looking small and insignificant next to designer handbags and gift certificates for spa weekends. The slights kept coming, each one chipping away at my resolve to keep the peace. I was left out of the planning for the bachelorette party in Vegas, told it was a wild girls' trip, and I probably wouldn't enjoy it. When the seating chart for the reception was being made, my mother placed me at a table with my great aunts and some distant cousins, far from the head table where the rest of the immediate family would be. "You know how sweet you are with the older folks, Eliza," she'd said, patting my hand. "They'll be so happy to have you." I tried, on one occasion, to talk to her. I found her in the kitchen one evening, addressing wedding invitations with a laser-focused intensity. I took a deep breath and started, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "Mom, I've been feeling a little left out of all the wedding planning." She didn't look up from her envelopes. "Don't be silly, Eliza. You've been a huge help. Who else would I have trusted to research the gluten-free cupcake options?" "That's not what I mean," I pressed on, my heart starting to beat faster. "I mean the big things. The dress shopping, the shower. It feels like you and Chloe don't really want me there." Finally, she put down her pen and looked at me, her expression a mixture of impatience and pity. "Oh, Eliza, you're being oversensitive. This is Chloe's time to shine. You've always been more of a behind-the-scenes person. You don't enjoy all this fuss. We're just trying to make things comfortable for everyone. Gaslighting, pure and simple." My feelings were invalidated, my role was defined for me, and I was dismissed as being too sensitive. It was the same conversation we'd had 100 times before in 100 different ways. I retreated, the familiar sense of defeat settling over me. What was the point in fighting when the judges were also the jury? It was my pre-wedding meeting with Mark, the photographer, that served as the final crack in my carefully constructed facade of indifference. We met for coffee a week before the wedding to go over the schedule. He looked at me, his kind, perceptive eyes taking in the dark circles under mine. "You look tired," he said, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. The simple, genuine concern in his voice was enough to make my throat tighten. I found myself telling him everything: the dress, the shower, the seating chart, the constant feeling of being on the outside looking in. I expected him to say I was overreacting, just like my mother had. Instead, he just nodded, his expression serious. "I remember your family from college graduation," he said quietly. "I took a photo of you all. It took me 10 minutes to get your mom to stop arranging Chloe's hair so she would look at the camera." The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. I'd forgotten about that. I remembered feeling so small that day, standing next to my radiant sister, feeling like an accessory to her achievement. "You have a light of your own, Eli," Mark continued, looking me straight in the eye. "It's just quieter. Not everyone knows how to appreciate quiet light. But it's there. Don't let them convince you it's not." He then said something that would echo in my mind for the next week. "My job is to capture the story of the day. The whole story. You're a major part of that story. Don't you forget it." I left that coffee shop feeling strangely fortified. His words were a lifeline, a confirmation that I wasn't crazy. The injustice was real. He saw me. Someone saw me. The feeling was so novel, so powerful, that it gave me the strength to face the final week. I told myself I could get through this one last performance. I would smile, wear the expensive dress, and fade into the background as expected. I had no idea that Mark's promise to capture the whole story would become the very thing that forced the entire ugly truth into the light. The morning of the wedding was a flurry of organized chaos. I arrived at the bridal suite at the designated time, my ridiculously expensive dress in a garment bag, my makeup done, and a practiced neutral smile fixed on my face. The room was buzzing with energy. Hairspray hung in the air like a cloud, and the pop of a champagne cork punctuated the chatter of Chloe and her bridesmaids. My mother was flitting around like a frantic hummingbird, adjusting Chloe's veil, fetching her a mimosa, and issuing orders to the makeup artist. I tried to help, offering to steam a bridesmaid's dress or organize the scattered shoes, but I was mostly waved away. My presence felt peripheral, like a distant relative who had wandered into the wrong room. Chloe was holding court, glowing and beautiful, the absolute center of her universe. I felt a pang of sadness for the sisterly connection we never had, for the easy camaraderie she shared with her friends that I was never invited into. The time for photos arrived. Mark and his assistant came to the suite, and he gave me a small, reassuring nod as he began orchestrating the getting ready shots. He was a true professional, putting everyone at ease while expertly capturing the laughter and excitement. He made sure to get a few photos of me helping Chloe with the back of her dress. A moment my mother had to stage direct because Chloe hadn't actually asked for my help. After an hour, it was time to head to the main venue for the family portraits before the ceremony. We were in the gardens of a historic estate, a stunning backdrop of manicured hedges and blooming roses. The sun was perfect. The air was warm. It was the very picture of the perfect day my mother had been so obsessed with. Mark began arranging the shots, starting with Chloe and Liam. They looked like a magazine advertisement, impossibly beautiful and happy. Then he called for the bride's parents. My father, looking proud and a little emotional in his tuxedo, stood beside Chloe, while my mother fussed with a stray piece of Chloe's hair, beaming at her radiant daughter. "Okay," Mark said, his voice cheerful and professional. "Now let's get the whole immediate family. Eliza, could you come stand next to your sister?" I started to move forward, a genuine smile finally reaching my lips. This was it, a photo of our family, all four of us together on this important day. But before I could take more than 2 steps, my mother held up her hand, stopping me in my tracks. "Just one moment, Mark," she said. her voice bright but firm. She turned to me, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Let's just get a few with Mommy, Daddy, and their little girl first. Just the three of them." She gestured between my father, Chloe, and herself. The implication was as sharp and as cold as an icicle to the heart. Their little girl, singular. The world seemed to slow down. The chirping of the birds, the distant sound of the string quartet warming up it all faded into a dull roar in my ears. I stood frozen on the grass, the other bridesmaids shuffling uncomfortably behind me. I saw a flicker of pity in one of their eyes before she quickly looked away. My father looked at the ground, his jaw tight. Chloe just preened for the camera, basking in the spotlight, completely untroubled by the casual cruelty of the moment. It wasn't just that she wanted a photo with her and Chloe. It was the public nature of it. The deliberate, calculated exclusion in front of an audience. She was drawing a line in the grass, and I was on the wrong side of it. All the years of being second best, of being the afterthought, of having my contributions ignored while Chloe's every whim was celebrated, it all coalesced into this one, single, soul-crushing moment. I felt the familiar sting of tears behind my eyes, the hot flush of humiliation creeping up my neck. My first instinct, honed by a lifetime of practice, was to retreat, to give a small, tight smile, nod, and step back into the shadows, to make things comfortable for everyone else, to swallow my pain and pretend it didn't happen. That's what the resourceful Eliza would do. She would figure it out. But then I saw Mark. He had lowered his camera. He wasn't looking at my parents or at Chloe. He was looking directly at me. And in his eyes, I saw not pity, but a quiet, simmering anger. I saw the memory of our conversation over coffee. I saw the validation he had given me. "You have a light of your own, Eli. Don't let them convince you it's not." In that instant, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a loud, dramatic snap, but a quiet, profound realignment. The part of me that had always craved their approval, that had been willing to shrink myself to fit into the tiny space they allotted me, finally went silent. It was replaced by a cold, clear certainty. The pain was still there, but for the first time, it wasn't turning inward into shame. It was turning outward into resolve. This was not about a photograph anymore. This was about my existence. My mother had tried to erase me, and I suddenly, fiercely, knew that I would not let her. I didn't know how, but I knew the performance was over. I had spent my entire life fading into the background, and I was done. The secret weapon in my story wasn't a hidden document or a long-lost letter. It was a person. It was Mark, my old friend, armed with a camera, a contract, and something my family had long since misplaced, a conscience. His plan wasn't something we had concocted together in secret. It unfolded organically, born from his own sense of decency in the face of their blatant cruelty. My only role was to stand my ground and allow him to fight the battle I had never been equipped to win. Mark's and my friendship in college was forged in the quiet corners of the campus library and over late-night study sessions fueled by cheap coffee. We were both on scholarships, both keenly aware of what it meant to work for everything we had. He was studying photojournalism, and I was his willing, if sometimes reluctant, subject for class projects. He had a gift for capturing people as they truly were, for seeing the nuances others missed. He had met my family once, on that graduation day he'd mentioned, and I remember him being very quiet after they left. "They love your sister a lot," was all he said. But the way he said it told me he understood everything. He saw the dynamic in a single 30-minute interaction. After college, we had drifted apart as lives do, but we kept in touch through social media, cheering on each other's successes from a distance. I was proud of the business he had built, the reputation he had earned for being not just a talented photographer, but a genuinely good person. When my mother had reluctantly agreed to hire him, I felt a sense of relief. At least one person at this wedding would be in my corner, even if only silently. Now, standing on that sun-drenched lawn, his silence had transformed into my shield. As my mother held her pose, smiling expectantly at him, Mark did not lift his camera. He kept it lowered, his expression unreadable. "Mark, dear," my mother prompted, her voice tight with annoyance. "The light is perfect. Let's get the shot." "Oh, Will?" Mark took a slow breath and looked from her to my father, then to Chloe. "I'm sorry, Karen," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "I don't think I can do that." A collective intake of breath rippled through the onlookers. My mother's smile vanished. "What do you mean you can't do that? We're paying you a great deal of money to do exactly that." "My contract," Mark began, gesturing vaguely with his hand, "is to document the family of the bride and groom. Eliza is the bride's sister. She is immediate family. A portrait of the bride with her parents that deliberately excludes her only sibling is not an accurate or ethical representation of the family. It's a fabrication." My father, who had been studying his shoes, finally looked up, his face reddening. "Now, see here. We are the client. We are paying for these photos. If we want a picture with just our daughter Chloe, you will take it." "Oh." Mark shook his head, a gesture so simple yet so powerful it seemed, to suck the air out of the garden. "With all due respect, sir, you're paying for my professional service and my artistic integrity. Taking that photo, under these circumstances, would compromise both. My brand is built on authenticity. This is not authentic." Chloe, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, her voice laced with the petulant tone she used when she wasn't getting her way. "This is my wedding day. Are you seriously going to ruin it over one stupid picture? Just take the photo. Who cares about Eliza?" The words, "Who cares about Eliza?" hung in the air, a final, brutal confirmation of everything I had always felt. But instead of shattering me, they galvanized me. I looked at Mark, and I saw the flicker of his jaw, the tightening of his grip on his camera. He cared, and in that moment, that was enough. My mind, usually a whirl of anxiety and self-doubt, became preternaturally calm. I saw the situation with a clarity I had never possessed. My family was not going to change. Their entire world was built on the foundation of Chloe's supremacy and my insignificance. But the world was bigger than them. In it, there were people like Mark, people who operated on principles of fairness and kindness. Mark's refusal was the key. He had shifted the power dynamic. Suddenly, my parents were no longer in control. Their demand was being met with a professional, immovable boundary. They could not bully him or gaslight him or dismiss him as too sensitive. He had a contract. He had a professional reputation. He had leverage they couldn't comprehend. A plan began to form in my mind, not a plan for revenge, but a plan for survival, a plan for escape. I realized I didn't have to stay for the whole charade. I didn't have to sit at the table with the great aunts and pretend to be happy. I didn't have to watch my sister's first dance and feel the sting of my own loneliness. All I had to do was get through this one public confrontation. Mark was creating a space for me, and I had a choice. I could either slink away, proving them right, or I could step into that space and claim it. I watched as the wedding planner, a woman with a perpetually stressed expression, hurried over, sensing the impending disaster. She began whispering frantically with my mother, who was now gesturing wildly toward Mark, her face a mask of fury. They were trapped. If they fired Mark on the spot, Chloe would have no professional photos of her perfect day. The memory, the evidence of their social triumph, would be gone. If they forced the issue, they risked a scene that would be far from perfect. Mark had them cornered, using the very thing they valued most image against them. He had created the ultimate checkmate, and I, the forgotten pawn, was about to become the queen. The garden, which moments before had been a scene of idyllic wedding day bliss, had become a silent, tension-filled theater. Every eye was on the central players: my furious mother, my flustered father, my indignant sister, and Mark, who stood like a calm, unmovable rock. I was still on the periphery, but I could feel the gravity of the moment pulling me toward the center. This was my confrontation, whether I had started it or not. The wedding planner, a harried woman named Corinne, was trying to mediate, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "Karen, perhaps we can just take the photo as the photographer suggests, and we can edit Eliza out later?" she offered, clearly desperate to de-escalate. My mother seized on the idea. "Fine," she snapped, turning to Mark. "Do that. Take the picture with all of us, and you can just Photoshop her out afterward." I felt a fresh wave of humiliation. To be included only on the condition of being digitally erased later, it was a new level of insult. But before I could even react, Mark shut it down. "No," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I will not do that. My work is not about creating false realities. We can take a photo of the full, immediate family as it actually exists, or we can move on to the next set of shots. The choice is yours. But we are wasting valuable light." He had called their bluff. He knew, and I knew, that the photos were non-negotiable for my mother. The entire event was predicated on being seen and memorialized in the most flattering light possible. My father finally stepped in, trying to appeal to Mark man to man. "Son, you're not understanding. This is a special day for our daughter Chloe. We just want a few special moments captured." "I understand perfectly, sir," Mark replied, his gaze unwavering. "And Eliza is your daughter, too. This is a special day for her as well. A day she's here to support her sister. Excluding her from this special moment is a statement. And it's not a statement I'm willing to help you make." It was the final, devastating blow to their authority. He had articulated the truth of the situation so plainly, so publicly, that there was no way to spin it. He had exposed the rot at the core of our family dynamic for everyone to see. My mother looked around, her eyes darting between the horrified faces of the bridesmaids and the stone-faced photographer. She was cornered. She shot me a look of pure venom, a look that said, "You did this. You ruined everything." "Fine," she hissed through gritted teeth. "Fine. Eliza, get in the picture. Let's just get this over with." It was not an invitation. It was a surrender. The word "fine" was laced with so much resentment it felt like a slap. The old me would have been wounded by her tone. The old me would have scurried into place, apologized for causing trouble, and tried to make myself as small as possible. But the old me was gone. She had died on that lawn a few minutes ago. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked forward. I didn't scurry. I walked with a deliberation I had never felt before. I passed my mother without looking at her and stood right next to Chloe. I didn't just squeeze in at the end. I took my rightful place. Chloe looked at me, her beautiful face twisted into an ugly sneer. "Happy now?" she whispered, so only I could hear. I looked back at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel intimidated. I just felt a deep, profound pity. "This was never about me being happy, Chloe," I said quietly. "This was about you all being decent. There's a difference." Mark, ever the professional, immediately took control. "Okay, beautiful. Let's see those smiles." "Dad, hand on your daughter's shoulder. Mom, a little closer. Eliza, can you lean in just a bit toward your sister?" Perfect. We stood there for what felt like an eternity. a tableau of a perfect family, held together by sheer willpower and the threat of social humiliation. The smiles on my parents' and sisters' faces were brittle, paper-thin masks of civility. My own smile, however, was small but genuine. It wasn't a smile of joy, but of vindication, of survival. The camera clicked. The flash popped. The moment was captured. Mark took a few more shots, then briskly announced, "Great! That's a wrap on that one. Now, let's get the bridesmaids over here with the bride." It was my dismissal. As my mother and father stepped away, my mother grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "I hope you're proud of yourself," she seethed, her voice low and furious. "You and your little friend. You've cast a pall over this entire day." "I didn't do anything, Mom," I said, pulling my arm free. "I just stood there. You're the one who couldn't stand the sight of your own daughter in a family photo." I turned and walked away before she could respond. I found Mark, who was setting up the next shot. He caught my eye and gave me a look that was part apology, part fierce approval. I didn't need to say anything. He knew. I had survived the confrontation. I had faced them, not with shouting or tears, but with a quiet dignity they couldn't break. The power they had held over me for 28 years, the power of their approval, was gone. They had tried to erase me, and in doing so, they had only made me see myself more clearly. The rest of the wedding stretched out before me, but it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't a participant seeking inclusion. I was an observer, and I had already decided I wouldn't be staying for the end of the show. The moment the family photos were over, a strange calm settled over me. The anxiety that had been my constant companion for months had evaporated, replaced by a quiet, resolute clarity. I had no desire to cause another scene or to seek further confrontation. My battle was won. All that was left was the strategic retreat. I drifted through the pre-ceremony cocktail hour, a ghost in a blush-colored dress. I watched my family reassemble their masks of happy hosts, greeting guests with smiles that I now knew were completely hollow. They avoided me, creating a small, invisible force field around me. It didn't hurt anymore. It felt like a relief. I was no longer trying to breach the walls. I was happy to be outside them. I found Mark as he was packing up some equipment before the ceremony began. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name. It was gratitude, but it was more than that. It was the feeling of being truly seen and defended for the first time in my life. He turned, his professional demeanor softening. "You don't have to thank me, Eli. I just did my job. And my job as a friend was to not let them walk all over you." He paused, looking at me with concern. "Are you going to be okay?" "I'm going to be better than okay," I replied, and I was surprised by how much I meant it. "But I don't think I can stay for the whole thing. It feels dishonest." He nodded in understanding. "Do what you need to do, just one thing." He reached into his camera bag and pulled out a small, plain business card. On the back, he scribbled his personal cell number. "I'll have the proofs from today ready in a few weeks. I'll make sure you get a full set sent directly to you, separate from your parents. And call me if you need to talk, or if you just want to get coffee and not talk about any of this." I took the card, the simple piece of paper, feeling like a passport to a new life. "I'd like that," I said. I sat through the ceremony in a back pew, an anonymous guest. I heard the vows, the promises of love and honor. I watched my sister, beautiful and radiant, and felt a strange detachment. I was watching a play, and I no longer felt connected to the actors. When they were pronounced husband and wife, I clapped along with everyone else, but I felt no surge of joy, only a quiet finality. I slipped out before the receiving line began. I found the gift table and placed my card on the present I had so carefully selected for them. I didn't go to the reception hall. I didn't find my assigned seat at the table of forgotten relatives. Instead, I walked through the parking lot, the gravel crunching under my impractical heels. When I got to my car, I took off the shoes that had pinched my feet all day and tossed them into the passenger seat. I slid behind the wheel, and for a long moment, I just sat there, breathing. I had arrived that morning as the invisible daughter, braced for humiliation. I was leaving as just Eliza, not a daughter, not a sister, just myself. And it felt like freedom. The drive back to my small apartment was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the sound of the tires on the pavement. When I walked through my front door, the silence of my own space was a welcome embrace. It wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. I took off the $400 dress, the symbol of my forced participation, and hung it in the back of my closet. I washed the professionally applied makeup off my face and put on my favorite old t-shirt and pajama pants. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on my little balcony, watching the city lights flicker on. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Where are you?" people are asking. Another from Chloe. "Seriously? You just left? Way to make my wedding about you." I looked at the messages, and for the first time, they had no power. They were just words on a screen from people who didn't know me. I didn't reply. I simply turned my phone off, silencing their world so I could finally exist peacefully in my own. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in a year. The dawn that broke the next morning felt different. It wasn't just another day. It was the first day of the rest of my life, a life where I would no longer be invisible. 1 year can feel like a lifetime, yet it can also pass in the blink of an eye. The person I was on the day of Chloe's wedding feels like a stranger to me now. A ghost in a blush-colored dress whose primary function was to absorb pain quietly. The 12 months that followed my silent departure from that reception were not a period of dramatic upheaval, but rather a slow, steady, and deliberate dismantling of an old life and the meticulous construction of a new one, brick by brick, on a foundation of self-respect. The immediate aftermath was defined by a profound and unsettling silence. My family, accustomed to my predictable compliance, seemed genuinely baffled by my disappearance. After the initial barrage of furious texts and voicemails fizzled out, a Cold War began. They were clearly expecting me to crack. In their worldview, I was the dependent one, the lonely one, the one who needed them. They assumed that the lack of their presence in my life would be a punishment, that I would eventually come crawling back, desperate for a scrap of their conditional affection. What they failed to understand was that the silence I was experiencing wasn't one of loneliness. It was one of peace. For the first time in my life, there was no one to please, no one to manage, no one whose emotional temperature I needed to constantly monitor. The quiet in my apartment was a sanctuary, and I was thriving in it. The wedding photos, the very catalyst for the breakdown, became an enduring symbol of our fractured reality. Mark, a true artist and an even better friend, sent me a private online gallery with every image he had taken. He was contractually obligated to provide the full set to his clients, my parents, but he sent mine first, with a note that read, "The real story." As I clicked through them, I saw what he meant. He included the tense, brittle family portraits, their forced smiles a testament to the drama of the day. But he had also captured dozens of small, candid moments I hadn't realized he'd seen me sharing a brief, genuine laugh with my great-aunt Susan before the ceremony. A quiet, contemplative shot of me watching from the back pew, my face in the car as I was about to drive away. Not tearful, but resolute. He had seen the entire narrative arc of my emancipation. My parents' reaction to the photos was predictably apoplectic. I learned from Aunt Susan that my mother had called Mark in a rage, demanding he remove all the candid shots of me and, of course, the infamous full family portrait. "We only want the happy pictures," she had insisted. Eliza cast a pall over the day, and we don't want to be reminded of it. Mark, ever the professional, had calmly explained that his contract was to document the day as it happened, not to create a fictionalized highlight reel. He refused to alter the historical record. The beautiful, leather-bound, and outrageously expensive wedding album they eventually produced had a conspicuous four-person-shaped hole in the family section. The erasure they had attempted on the lawn that day was now a permanent, glossy reminder of their failure, a blank space that spoke louder than any picture could. Freed from the constant, low-grade stress of my family dynamic, my own life began to blossom in unexpected ways. The energy I had once poured into anticipating their needs and managing their egos was now mine to invest in myself. At the library, I stopped being just a quiet, competent employee and started being an innovator. I drafted a detailed proposal for a new community outreach program I called the Bookmobile Beacon, a mobile librarian service designed to bring books, technology workshops, and social connection to elderly and homebound patrons in underserved neighborhoods. I presented it to the university board with a confidence that surprised even myself. They not only approved it, but gave me a promotion and a budget to bring it to life. The project became my passion. I spent my days driving a brightly decorated van, which I'd affectionately named the Gutenberg, to nursing homes, community centers, and the small, isolated apartment buildings on the edge of town. I saw the faces of people light up when I handed them a new novel. I taught a grandmother how to video chat with her grandchildren for the first time. I sat and listened to the stories of people who, like me, had often felt invisible. My quiet, resourceful nature, so often dismissed by my family as a boring but useful trait, was now my greatest professional asset. I was creating community. I was making a tangible difference. I was being valued not for what I did for others in a transactional sense, but for who I was. And then there was Mark. The coffee date he'd promised happened 2 weeks after the wedding. I was nervous, worried that our conversation would inevitably circle back to the painful events of that day. But he skillfully steered us into comfortable territory. We talked for hours, not about my family, but about everything else. The obscure history books I was reading, the gritty black and white documentary photography he admired, our shared memories of being broke college kids surviving on ramen noodles. It was easy. It was comfortable. It was the first time I had felt truly seen by a romantic interest, not as an accessory or a project, but as a whole person. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekends, spent exploring dusty antique shops and hiking trails that snaked along the coast. He never once tried to fix my family situation or offer unsolicited advice. He simply listened when I needed to talk and provided a welcome distraction when I didn't. He celebrated my promotion at the library with a surprise party, inviting the small circle of friends who had been my true support system all along. With him, I didn't feel the need to perform or pretend. He loved my quiet light, and in his presence, I felt it grow brighter. Meanwhile, I received sporadic updates on my family's perfect world through the family grapevine, primarily my kind-hearted Aunt Susan. The news was not surprising. Chloe and Liam's marriage, built on the shallow foundations of image and status, began to struggle mightily once the spectacle of the wedding was over. Liam, I heard, had expected a perfectly curated wife who would manage his home and his social calendar with effortless grace. Instead, he got Chloe impulsive, financially irresponsible, and utterly allergic to the mundane realities of domestic life. The golden prize was apparently less appealing when it came to budgeting for groceries or remembering to pay the electric bill. Chloe, in turn, felt bored and constrained by the predictable rhythms of married life. The fairy tale had a surprisingly tedious and difficult second act, filled with arguments over credit card statements and Chloe's refusal to get a job. My parents having invested so much of their identity in Chloe's success, were at a complete loss. They had spent a lifetime acting as her managers, promoters, and financiers. Now, with Chloe officially Liam's responsibility and me maintaining a firm and silent distance, their primary purpose seemed to have vanished. They tried to insert themselves into Chloe's marital problems, but Liam, a man from a family where boundaries were sacrosanct, politely but firmly shut them down. They found themselves with an empty nest that felt emptier than they could have ever imagined. Their first real attempt to breach my walls came around Thanksgiving. My mother called, her voice carefully casual, suggesting I should come over for dinner, that we should let bygones be bygones for the sake of the family. The old me would have caved instantly, grateful for the olive branch. The new me recognized it for what it was, a summons, not an invitation. I agreed to meet her for lunch the following week, but on my terms at a neutral restaurant downtown, in the middle of a weekday. She spent the first 20 minutes of our meal complaining about how difficult Chloe was being, how ungrateful Liam was for their help. Then, she finally turned her attention to me. "We miss you, Eliza," she said, her eyes welling up with what looked like genuine tears. "The family just doesn't feel right without you there to smooth things over." Her choice of words was revealing. They didn't miss me. They missed my function. "The family wasn't right with me, Mom," I replied, my voice gentle but unwavering. "You wanted a supporting character, not a daughter. You wanted a stagehand to make sure the star's lighting was always perfect. I can't play that part anymore." I laid out my new boundaries with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. I would be happy to see them for major holidays, but on neutral ground, perhaps at Aunt Susan's house or a restaurant. There would be no more obligatory Sunday dinners where I was expected to be the quiet observer. No more being the on-call family therapist and IT support. Our relationship, I explained, would have to be one of mutual respect between three independent adults, or it wouldn't be one at all. It was a slow, painful, and imperfect process for them. They didn't fully understand, and perhaps they never will. The concept of me having non-negotiable terms was utterly foreign to them. But to my surprise, they began to try, in their own clumsy, faltering way. A week after our lunch, my father emailed me an article from The Atlantic about the digitization of ancient manuscripts, with the subject line, "Thought you'd find this interesting." It was a small gesture, but it was monumental. It was the first time he had ever acknowledged my specific interests, my separate world. My mother started sending me pictures of her rose garden, asking for my opinion on the aphids. They were baby steps, but they were steps in the right direction. They were finally learning to see me not as a satellite orbiting Chloe, but as a planet in my own right. The justice I found wasn't loud or vengeful. It wasn't about their downfall or my gloating triumph. It was the quiet, undeniable, and deeply satisfying justice of a life well lived. It was the peace of my own home, paid for with my own salary. It was the pride in a career that brought me fulfillment and made a difference in my community. And it was the warmth of a relationship with a man who cherished my quiet light and encouraged me to let it shine. They had tried to block me from a single picture, but in the end, I had built a life so full, so vibrant, and so authentic that it could never be contained in a single frame. It was a sprawling, beautiful mural, and I was holding the brush. Looking back on that day in the garden, it's strange to think how a single, ugly moment could become the most beautiful turning point of my life. For years, I believed that family was an obligation, a role I had to perform regardless of how it made me feel. I thought that by being quiet, by being accommodating, by making myself smaller, I was keeping the peace. But I wasn't keeping the peace. I was sacrificing my own. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about them, but about myself. I had spent so much of my life waiting for my family to see me, to value me, to finally acknowledge my worth. But the truth is, you can't force someone to see you. Your worth isn't something that can be granted or taken away by others' opinions. It's something you have to claim for yourself. That day, when Mark lowered his camera, he didn't give me my voice. He simply created a silence long enough for me to find my own. He reminded me that the world is bigger than the small, dysfunctional fishbowl of a family. There are people out there who will see your light, even if it's a quiet one. There are friends who become your chosen family, who will defend you, support you, and celebrate you for exactly who you are. Building those relationships, nurturing them, that is where true security lies. My relationship with my parents and sister is still a work in progress. It's defined by the boundaries I set, not by the expectations they project. Some days are better than others. There is still a part of me that mourns the close, loving family I always wished for, but I've accepted that I can't change who they are. I can only change how I allow them to affect me. By stepping out of the frame, I gave myself the power to create my own picture, one filled with love, respect, and quiet, joyful authenticity. My life is finally my own masterpiece. The most valuable thing I gained had nothing to do with winning an argument or proving them wrong. It was the understanding that you are the sole author of your own story. You get to decide who the main characters are, what the setting is, and most importantly, how it ends. You don't have to live in the background of someone else's narrative. Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up for your place in your own family? What did you learn from that experience? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and I believe our stories have the power to help each other feel a little less alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons about finding your strength. Remember to share this video with someone who might need a reminder that their worth is not determined by their place in a photograph, but by the beautiful, unique story they have to tell. Thank you for listening. May you always find the courage to step into the light, especially when others try to keep you in the shadows.